Hi, good morning. I'm still in this backpackers inn, or guest car, they call it. Some foreigners visiting, some Chinese, South African, Dutch, American, and more. And then, interesting time in the evening, like last night. Actually, the three women about age 35 or so are Japanese, three of them actually. And I was doing my work on the side in this shared room. They call me Otosan, which means dad. And I responded without any hesitation, except I thought that's odd. I realized that may be a new trend, but I feel good because there was that affectionate sense. So we had this conversation and shared some kind of a drink and meal or something like that. So what it triggered me is, and along with others, is to kind of summarize some of the observation of me coming back to Japan and like rediscovering Japan. And there are lots of interesting stuff, and I don't know what's the general character, but it's continued to my thought that I shared about what or harmony in Japanese from the Prince Shotoku days of almost 1500 years ago or so, maybe 1400 years. That's the consideration of others as a group to share, whether it's difficult time or a good time. That's the spirit. And I see that's living in this island nation, protected from other foreign influence from those days when the Japan was closed. And I still feel that the characterization of Japanese being very unique, and even to the point that I shared the idea of a sanctuary in this turbulent world. You're sitting somewhere, shared room, and someone called you, "Hey, Dad." So, what's the spirit, the way of Japanese? And after my spending time out of Japan for 40 some years, although I came back occasionally, of course, there's some characterization here I listed. They seem to live long. Why? They they go through anxiety and stress, but more as a group, which is different now than the past because of the modernization and all of that. But still, in this case of this experience of someone calling me dad, adult at 35 years old or so, point there's that connection that they maintain, which I thought is, in my word, melting or communicating and relating and resonating to the point that I mentioned about melting into nature. So there's that sense of being nature, natural. And I believe that sense of connection to nature is manifested in the society as in this small incident. But I can come up with other incidents that I can share. In fact, I posted a video in Japanese, unfortunately, about the man I met, where we share this hot spring, uh, hot spring, putting your feet into the hot spring, and the couple other people I was talking, and this guy stopped by and joined, and Maruyama-san. We had a wonderful conversation about how he overcame actually his wife to overcome serious disease. And connected to that, I share that video about how it may connect it to the spiritual or root of who we are. That if we have the sense of connection, not just among the people resonating, but down deep to your heart, so to speak, or the origin of where we came from, then magic happens. And in this case, overcoming difficulties, not to overcome with will, but melting into the flow of the nature, relating, resonating, and looking as if from inside of you, being with disease that his wife had. And in that video, I share that he met 30 to 50 people who had overcome difficulties with the cancer and others. And there's a spirit of sharing. Of course, they go through the difficulty and overcome. They want to share. And I said something about his name, but the book was Seeking the meaning of life or something. The Jewish guy's experience in the Auschwitz. That this guy had a dream and connecting to his wife somewhere in Auschwitz brought him to overcome, pass through the difficulty to live. That sense that Mariema-san shared about his wife and those he and she met together, visiting different people to share, indicate there's a way that we can resonate, communicate, share, and collect the wisdom, or if I use Jung's analogy, what's that one? Synchronicity. Different people going over the boundaries, across or down deep to where we came from, we find fascinating possibilities coming out. I use the word ride the wave of the universe. So what I can list some of the ideas that I picked up. Collecting the wisdom of people is one, and acceptance and be with it, whether it's typhoon, the Fukushima nuclear power plant tragedy, difficulties. As a nation, they share that. Why? Because that's how went through all the difficulties. And they didn't have much wars with foreigners. And when there was a case from China, or I forgot the name of the nation at the time, again, maybe the war, trying to attack Japan, they helped themselves with the help of, they call it kamikaze. Yeah, that's right. The typhoon came, and then the typhoon helped Japan to protect themselves. So over 2,000 years or more of the Japan's independence or away from the other part of the world, they maintain their identity in a way, and therefore the homogenized war spirit, I think, prevailed, and at the time collecting the wisdom of people. I noticed some of the video on YouTube that the foreigners are commenting that even like 100 years ago, they found this nation has a very high moral integrity, also very oriented to be organizing and cleaning. One episode I can share is that yesterday I was visiting my friend, a German friend living in Japan in this town, and before I got there, there was this woman picking up the weed. There are lots of weeds everywhere. So Western mind says, what's the point of doing it? So I start to talk with her, and eventually I figured out that his husband is out at 80 years old or something, and she said something like, when the husband is out, there's peace or some, like a joke-like statement, but in a haiku kind of a sense. So she picks up the weed and, keep doing it, and we talked. And there's that harmony, the way to process, okay, my husband is this and that, but when he's out, I can be peaceful, and they find a way, some such thing. So they endure, if that's the word, or process it in such a manner that they are close to nature, be with nature, as if living in a different dimension. Again, melting into nature or connecting to the root of who we are, that's what we say. And whatever the case is, Japanese like to sit in the hot bath and they like to clean up. And that also is something related to what I did when I shared in my book about the Toyota production system, waste elimination, appreciation of human potential, the Japanese approach, bottom up, not necessarily top down. But in Japan, there's a sense of oyakata hinamaru, which I said somewhere, that higher level authority, just live with it and be happy with it. So acceptance, not so much in a spiritual way, but maybe behind that there's some governing force, maybe related to the emperors and the Shinto, that the governance, you don't argue with that. So compared to the hate and arguing in the US, it may not be fair to explain or characterize in that way. The Japanese way is go with the way of what's going on from authority. And that's dangerous in some cases, like the war, if they believe in some authority. But there's a sense as a group to accept, digest, and even strangers call them dad. I said, why don't you call me great grandfather or something because of my age? But they just close. So there's a acceptance. Kanyo is Japanese word. Yeah, acceptance may be the word, but it has much more delicate nuance. Kan, it's overseeing and understanding so that you don't argue as much. Whereas when I was young, and the reason why I left Japan was because of too much of that, and I call it shigarami, or the society's network is too complex. I was fairly good at processing in the organization and overseeing how things happens and how to deal with it. But it takes too much energy. I thought the American way is much simpler and just go with your gut feel and explore and see what happens. So I left Japan 40 some years ago, but every now and then I'm coming back and I kind of synthesizing of what I have gone through overseas and also back to Japan and back and forth. So this is one of the back and forth experience, but this time with the backpackers in here, that I have this tiny room, the meeting various people and sharing things. So, like a hot spring is just walk distance. The tiny hot spring, you can only put the feet in, but I sometimes put my whole body in just to warm up. It's very close, and the Mori-san in the shrine is only a few minutes walk. And I love what he does, and I may have shared what he has done with his shrine, devoting all his God, cleaning up and little chanting in the morning at 6 every single day for the last 40 years, perhaps more. And it's meticulously oriented, and it's compared to the other shrines where things are changing and many people leave shrine, but he's with the way of, you can call it, Shin, Shin is kami, means God. Uh, Jinja is where the God stays, lives, kind of a notion. Jinja, Jin is also God, kami, same thing, and the ja is the space. So he take care of it, and it's just amazing. I mentioned about pulling the weeds. This old woman on the street nearby the house, diligently, peacefully melting into the situation, not fighting, melting with the way of nature or the perhaps the way of the society with the authority. There's some argument, as any society, but there's a way of processing it, not too much in logic, but with the feeling, with the idea of the wa, from Shotoku, or harmony. So that is as if the group comes first, not the individual. So not the individualism, but harmony with the group, identity, as if they share the same faith, live with it. Japan as a nation created that harmony, the sense. So when I posted the Hachi dog who went to the station, Richard Gere was in that movie Hachi as a professor who had a heart attack, and the dog went every day, and he didn't come back one day, but he kept on going even in the snow days and setting, and therefore the statue of Hachi was at the Shibuya station, where now many foreigners wait to take a selfie to be with that statue. What triggered them? I think the world is speaking some message that the statue of Hachi, dedication, sincerity, has some meaning in this creative world. I said, be sincere and truthful. Certainly, that Hachi dog is, but he doesn't have the brain. We have some brain, but we may abuse it or abused by the brain and lose the connection. So that's the word I use, myo, which means difficult to translate. Maybe there's no way to translate that. The myo is something beyond the word, appearing, but telling us, but the word we don't hear, but we can sense. So it's beyond the word expression, but we have the ability to sense, say, the sun, the blue sky, the cloud, and the big tree standing is sending the message. If we are occupied in our mind, we don't see it, feel it, we are within, but not melting into the nature or melting into the way of the nature. So that's the discovery I'm pointing. So I can go on and on, but maybe I just skip some of the things I wrote here. There's the will of people that we can succeed as a group, as an individual, and have the passion. As mentioned by Konosuke Matsushita, first thing is to have the passion, the will, that if you have that, you can achieve something. So individually, but as a group, or even as a nation, there's that sense. It can be diverted in the wrong way, like World War II. I am not familiar with all the intricate process of that because I wasn't in that and not studied enough about it. But that war spirit can be diverted in the wrong way when the wrong person is at the top, and some people, just like Trump may, Hitler may, pop up. So there has to be a legal or logical process to go through. And I think that was Kant who said, Immanuel Kant, reason and the intuition. Intuition is good, but it cannot be lame, that you have to check with the logic. And the logic by itself doesn't have the meaning that can be carried out, like the myo, some beyond the mind, the logic kind of a presence and the way of the nature. So we are in this heart and brain configuration, and we go up and down and connect, or maybe not knowing what the root is and just living only like a machine in your brain. And that causes the suffering and all that. But in Japan's case, they are more intuitive and less logical. That might create problem, but they try to figure this out, and that's the process that I see is happening in Japan. Not to say which is better or worse, but that's the symptom I feel, and to recognize that, and not overly depending on one but the other, but hopefully be able to see the whole picture, so that we can navigate individually the life, but as a nation and as a world, that's where we are. Depending on where you are, the inclination, the learning, and the process will be different. So it's not the easy thing to the nation and the group, or even individual within, to find the passage. But if we can digest some of those constructs, how things can happen in the American way or Japanese way, and I lived in both ways and get confused, but trying to process it. And when I say, someone say, Otosan, beautiful. There's that connection. I don't think it happened in the US. Maybe you have to be prepared to deal with it, with the protective sense. That's a hate, anxiety, Japanese, homogenized, sharing, enduring, and find the passage. What a life as human to go through. I posted also no. Just say yes, hi. And that's the start, because no need to be suffering. Starting point is always the presence, hi, as it is, acceptance, and then this pieces would self-organize itself. That's what I see within me, the different pieces of, I call mini-me, speaking different language, different ideas and orientation, but me as a whole should have a point like a meditation, no mind, so that there's a room of all who I am that accumulated, and the ideas that wisdom and compassion can flow or pop up, so that helps me to be sane in this turbulent world. So one word maybe I add is that Hakoniwa, the small garden, is what it means. The Hako is the box, and the Niwa is garden, the small. So it's kind of like a bonsai. There's that small space that is manicured and have its all element working together as peace and harmony and have balance. Maybe it can be seen in the painting or calligraphy or a tea ceremony or swordmanship or no that I mentioned, the no play. That's the signifying of those elements of the way we live in different platforms, so to speak. And if we can see that, how each of the microcosm, the mini universe, is connected to the larger, and then have the conflict resolved by this, I call it massaging, looking at the situation from different angles, and like I'm sharing here, of that process to go through, which requires us to go to beyond our mind boundary or ego way of looking up. This is my way, and I don't care what the rest. That's sad. So hopefully we have the compassionate wisdom sense develop and ride the way of the universe. And for me, revisiting Japan, rediscovering Japan is kind of like stimulating some of the little pieces that I had in the past and was dormant to be reactivated. So I'm kind of balancing myself, and I want to come back and focus this or extend this discussion so that we may know who we are, why we are here, what to do, be happy, have fun, wise, and compassionate, live a good life.